good afternoon, everyone. Absolutely thrilled to be with you today in this room that I think is the biggest room, which reflects the importance of the topic that we're going to discuss today. I'm Marie-Laure Schaffelberger. I'm the president of Sustainable Finance Geneva, who has been kind of incubating the GLISS for the last couple of years under the leadership of Alpha Mundi and a number of other partners that work on this topic. And we are really happy to have the next couple hours to discuss the really, really key topic that this is. The situation for women and girls globally is it's not a great one. I'll abstain from throwing out the numbers because you'll get a lot of numbers over the coming hours. What we need now is to close the gaps, is to create much more action around this important topic. So our program today will take us through a number of different areas. First, the business case for gender lens investing, and answering really the question why investing in women is good both for business but also for the planet. We know that in the last 2 years there has been a slide back in progress on the SDGs. SDG 5 is no exception, and this is really tragic because it is so interlinked to achieving all 17. So we really need to close that gap. We need to start accelerating. Private sector action is going to be key in doing this as well as creating new partnerships. The second part is going to be more diagnostic. Where do we stand today? What traction in this business case are we seeing? What is the data? And what is really the state of women in finance and business? And then we will explore the critical frameworks, guidance, and indicators available to investors today in order to channel capital to this important part of our industry. So we'll hear from a few initiatives, some very concrete projects. We'll then take a break, because that's quite a lot, and take about a 10-minute break. Not a long one. It's really one so you can stretch your legs, get some air, digest. And after this, we will have 4 practitioners that will showcase how they can concretely and successfully invest in gender lens. So last but not least, we'll have a fireside chat and an in-conversation with a private bank. We're also very privileged today to have State Councillor Fabienne Fischer, which will give us an introduction in a couple of minutes. But before that, I would love to welcome to the stage Sarah Jari, who is the Vice President of the GLISS initiative, and who will give you an overview of what the GLISS is doing and why it's important. Sarah is a finance professional with 2 decades of experience in strategy consulting, private equity, and in microfinance with women-focused financial institutions. She's previously worked for Bain, ICIC, and Bamboo Capital, and she's now putting her talents at work at Responsibility Investments. And we're really lucky to have her on the GLISS as our Vice President. Over to you, Sarah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you to tell you who we are and what we're going to discuss today and why we think it's important to push the gender lens investment agenda. Marie-Laure has just highlighted before me the need to channel more attention, but also more capital to the gender imbalance so that we can create more equitable societies. We at the Gender Lens Initiative for Switzerland, which we also call the GLISS, have come to Building Bridges to celebrate the recent progress that we've seen globally and in Switzerland, but unfortunately to also highlight the many challenges that remain ahead of us. In the face of headwinds around the world, whether they are economic, social, environmental, and political, ensuring that gender is recognized as critical to addressing global problems is more important than ever. In 2022, the WEF estimates that achieving global gender equality will take, you would not guess, 132 years at the current pace of progress, given the policies and practices we are using. Every day, as most of you know, women face global discrimination in many forms, social, economic, educational, and political. COVID-19 has only exacerbated those issues, these inequalities, setting back years of progress in right policies, gender-based violence, and gender pay gaps. These bleak realities are compounded in the fact that the SDG 5, which is the gender equality, is the fourth least financed SDG. As the financial world moves from pledges to action plans on their net zero targets and grapples with the implication of biodiversity loss in portfolios, we should not forget the S into SDG and systematically integrate it into our investment processes and product strategies. This is urgent. According to a recent report from UN Women, the current climate crisis has a greater impact on women and amplifies existing gender inequalities, particularly in the developing world. We're also seeing women's rights rolled back in the global north, for those of you who followed the US Supreme Court decision. And that has shown us that even today, women's rights are not synonymous with human rights. So what is gender lens investment? I will go by the GIN definition, the Global Impact Investor Network. Gender lens investment is a strategy or an approach to investing that considers gender-based factors across the investment process to advance gender equality. So what it means, in simple terms, is that as we invest, not only do we want to include financial indicators, but also now make sure that we equally include gender indicators. Gender lens investment has significant benefits, which have been already measured, reported in a wide variety and a number of reports. And it has been shown that it fosters innovation, resilience, and profitability. And in our report that I'll talk about in a minute, there are plenty of numerical examples around that, but I've picked only a few numbers that are very telling, in my opinion. Gender diverse teams financially outperform their non-diverse counterparts by 25%. Above average gender diverse management teams report an innovation revenue 19 percentage points above those with a below average diversity team. Companies on the MSCI World Index with strong female leadership generate 10.1 return on equity compared to 7.4 for those without this strong female leadership. So this is 35% higher, not a small number, even by financial indicators. In this way, the gender lens investment approach has proven to lead to positive, desirable outcomes for both society and businesses. Yet, and coming closer to home in Switzerland, only 2% of CEOs in Switzerland are women, and it's 8% when we're looking at board members. Also strikingly, despite the same level of education in Switzerland, the gender pay gap, is 19%. Very high, hard to justify in Switzerland, in my opinion. So who are we, more precisely, at the Gender Lens Initiative for Switzerland? We are a working group within the Sustainable Finance Geneva, aiming to enhance Switzerland's contribution to this SDG 5, so poorly funded, and mobilize more capital from Swiss institutions with a gender lens approach. At the GLISS, we work to advance industry standards, we also support market research, and we raise awareness on financial products and innovation with a gender lens. This year, the GLISS is 2 years, and we have continued our progress in the past year on our 3 core objectives that I've just mentioned: emerging frameworks, market research, awareness raising. And our work, activities, and progress on the 3 above pillars are all included in our annual report that we are officially launching and making available today. And you'll find an overview in this report of the detailed landscape of the gender lens investment space globally and in Switzerland. It covers also recent trends. It covers recent trends relevant to gender, such as I did mention earlier, COVID-19, the circular economy, climate change, and outlines examples of best practices, some of which we'll hear today. It outlines concrete opportunities for investors of all kinds and the wider ecosystem to take action to promote gender equality. Despite the number of global lens funds having doubled in 2021, our researchers found that, unfortunately, no new fund was launched in Switzerland in the last 12 months with this gender lens approach. It's also clear that more companies in Switzerland and obviously globally need to walk the talk. In Switzerland in particular, we only have a few companies that are already officially certified on their positive gender lens practices. While we lay out in our 22 report that more actors are opening their eyes to the potential of gender lens investment, we also highlight the multiple gender-related indicators that can be improved. Last, coming to the conclusion, we would like to thank our contributors. There's been over 30 of them whose contribution we've received and has allowed us to come up with that report. Their insights, in addition to our own research, shows that now more than ever it is crucial to employ the gender lens approach to investing. The report, if you're interested to go through it and get more details, is downloadable on the SFG website. And if you're ever interested to support our work, we are available to discuss sponsorship and other engagement opportunities that would fit your own interest. Today we're offering you a live session, as Marie-Laure has mentioned, to cover the spectrum of our work at the GLISS. And I would want to finish to thank our sponsors and collaborators. So there's obviously and primarily Sustainable Finance Geneva, but also Alpha Mundi, UN Women Oxfam, the World Bank, and Capital Partners. And last, the entire GLISS team, and I'm sure Team Raji, who's chairing the GLISS, will join me in thanking and expressing how grateful we are for the hard work this small team has put together in coordinating our contributors. And this is Kali, Arlette, Eliane, and Signe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, for reminding us also of the importance that investors have both in applying gender as a lens to all mainstream portfolios, right? It's a characteristic we can look out for and engage with companies on, but also in this important role we have in channeling capital. So for our second set of opening remarks, I am thrilled to have State Councillor Fabienne Fischer join us for some opening remarks. She is a lawyer and politician, a member of the Green Party, and elected to the Council of State by election for the Canton of Geneva in March 2021. And she's in charge of the Department for the Economy and Employment, which is why it's so crucial to have her here on this important topic. In the 80s, Fabienne Fischer was a student at the University of Geneva, and she chaired the scholarship board for the National Students' Union. After graduating in history, she actually taught for several years between 1987 and 2003, so doing quite a lot of public service in that time. She earned a master's degree in law in 2002 and the Geneva Bar in 2005, and worked as a lawyer on administrative and employment law, as well as family law and amicable settlements of disputes. Fabienne Fischer has been a member of the Green Party in Switzerland since 2007 and became a city councillor in 2011. She sat on the board of directors of the Geneva International Airport in 2012 to 2018, and as the vice president of the board of directors and chair of the real estate committee of the Hospice Général. So a lot of public service, in addition to being a woman at a local politic level, where in Switzerland they are really underrepresented. So I think it's only between 25 and 30%. So thank you for that. I have to say that Fabienne, unfortunately, will have to leave us right after her intervention because she has obviously important political meetings to get to, but we're really, really happy to have you. So Fabienne Fischer, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished friends, first of all, thank you for these kind words of welcoming me. I'm very happy to be here and be able to say a few words to introduce this important event. To be frank, I have somewhat ambivalent feelings when speaking to you now. Of course, it's a great pleasure to be here. But it's also a feeling of revolt in front of the stark reality we are facing. SDG 5, gender equality, is a fundamental human right, but it is so much more. It is also a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. While there has been progress on this front over the last decades, many challenges remain. Discriminatory laws and social norms remain pervasive. Women continue to be underrepresented at all levels of leadership, and COVID-19 has tragically reversed some of the progress. The numbers are staggering. In 2021, women accounted for 49.6% of the world population, but did hold only 28 of managerial positions. Women hold 26% of national parliamentary seats, with gender parity likely to take another 40 years globally. Furthermore, a massive sanitation gap affects billions of girls and women disproportionately across the world. Do you want more numbers? The World Economic Forum has predicted it would take 267 years to close the economic gender gap. And the United Nations estimates it will take more than 100 years to achieve SDG 5 at the current pace of progress. Given the immensity and urgency of the challenges we must overcome, this is intolerable, especially if one takes into account the imperatives of social justice. This is why we must speak louder. This is why we must act with more determination toward a paradigm shift. This is why implementing and scaling up the Gender Lens Initiative Switzerland is so important. If we truly want to lead on the future of finance and positive impact for the planet and people, we need to be at the forefront of these issues. We have done groundbreaking work in microfinance and impact investing in this ecosystem. But we now have the opportunity to embark on the next frontier for financial innovation, gender lens investing. Why we should invest in women is obvious. Countless studies are highlighting the significant economic and social benefits of doing so. Finance really needs to accelerate its transition towards making gender lens investing mainstream, offering gender-sensitive business models, including considerations for gender equality at the workplace and in society, access to capital for women and services that empower women and girls. All these are not just questions of reconciling purpose and profit. Women are now 32% of the world's wealth. Related financial assets are expected to rise at a compound annual growth rate of 7.2% and reach USD 93 trillion by 2023. This makes it obvious that gender lens investing will fast become a crucial question for finance actors. It is about strategic positioning, risk management, competitiveness, and talent attraction, nothing less. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished friends, the gaps between the current reality of women's presence in sustainable finance and the volumes of gender lens investing are still unacceptably large. This is most unfortunate. To close that gap is far from being mission impossible, quite the opposite. Tools and solutions are already available, as tonight's discussion will highlight. I count on you all to work tirelessly. Together, we must change the present reality as swiftly as possible. I stand ready to help wherever I can. Let us not walk the talk, we need to run the talk. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very, very much for that, reminding us that our voice matters. But I always find it quite strange when I hear all these numbers about how much more efficient it is to have diverse teams and to take these things into account, that an industry that prides itself on being forward-looking and really identifying gaps in the market hasn't yet jumped on this. So I'm glad that we're doing this event because hopefully that will help reverse that trend. Thank you very much, Councillor Fischer. So our last opening remark is actually a video by Anita Bhatia, who is the Deputy Executive Director for Resource Management, Sustainability and Partnerships at UN Women. Prior to joining UN Women, Ms. Bhatia had a distinguished career at the World Bank Group, serving in various senior leadership and management positions, both at headquarters and in the field. So as we go, could we launch the video?
Excellencies, colleagues and friends. On behalf of UN Women, it is a real pleasure for me to share some reflections on gender equality in the financial industry. As many of you know, UN Women is the flagship entity in the global multilateral system that works on gender equality and women's rights. We deliver programs, policies, and standards that aim to uphold women's human rights and ensure that every woman and every girl can live up to her full potential. So when we talk about investing in women or applying a gender lens to financial instruments, we are actually talking about how to improve the lives of women across the globe. This implies that gender equality must be looked at in multiple dimensions. Representation is one such dimension. We applaud companies that are making efforts to improve gender balance in managerial and decision-making roles. However, it is no secret that in the financial sector, women are still underrepresented at all levels, particularly senior levels, but they are underrepresented as depositors, borrowers, bank board members, and regulators. According to the IMF, women account for less than 2% of the CEOs in financial institutions and less than 20% of executive board members. This is something that must be corrected with a sense of urgency. Of course, gender equality is more than women on boards or in leadership positions. We also encourage the businesses that the financial sector is engaged in to focus on establishing inclusive value chains, in worrying about gender-responsive procurement, in ensuring that suppliers are women, and in ensuring that they are investing in women's enterprises and women-run businesses in local communities. We know that supporting women's equal participation in the labor force can add anything from $12 to $28 trillion to the global economy. We should not leave that money lying on the table. Therefore, from UN Women, we urge all financial market participants to look at a variety of areas, pick the ones that make the most business sense, and work on resolving the fact that women and men do not have equal opportunities, equal pay, equal access to high-paying jobs, share the burden of unpaid care work, or can live a life free from physical and sexual violence, including harassment. The investor community has a very important role to play in advancing gender equality and empowering women. We know that global asset managers are eager to show that their portfolios are ESG compliant. We are also aware that there is tremendous backlash today against greenwashing, pinkwashing, and that there is criticism today of those who are seeking to be ESG compliant. There is a growing segment, however, of clients demanding both return and impact from their money. Investing in women is not just the right thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. And because we have overwhelming evidence that investing yields a positive impact on the bottom line and is good for the planet, we would like to make a call to action to everyone in the financial services industry to take on the issue of women's equality, of gender equality, and women's empowerment, and make this an integral part of your business strategies. I wish you excellent discussions ahead. Thank you.
Nice opening remarks from women tackling this on the front lines. So I'm delighted to welcome our keynote speaker for the day, Christina Tora, who will speak about the business case for investing in women and why this is such a key driver for all of us. She's Chief Market Development Officer for the Global Steering Committee Group for Impact Investment, where she supports the development of the global impact ecosystem through national advisory boards. Prior to the GSG, Christina co-founded and led the Global Social Entrepreneurship Network. Very much looking forward to your remarks.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, it's such a pleasure to be here. When I was asked to do a keynote about gender lens investing, I thought to myself, wow, where am I going to start? There's so much to say. Well, I will start with a silly anecdote. Yesterday, I was playing with my friend's kids, and we played at GLISS. You know GLISS, Who Am I? You know this game, right? Among the 24 characters, there is only 5 women and 1 black woman. I picked the black woman, and I lost. I really wonder what this says about our world, right? Well, today I'm going to give you a few data points, trends, and leading to a few provocations so that we can focus our efforts on what's most important. So if we look at the definition of gender lens investing, there's 3 dimensions. 1, getting women to meaningfully participate across the investment value chain. 2nd, supporting investing businesses that offer services or products that benefit women and girls. And 3rd, dismantling structural gender inequalities. I will call this the system change approach. So I will take you on a journey. I believe that gender lens investing is a journey. If we look at, you probably know, right, the ABC framework of the impact management project. A, avoid harm. B, benefit stakeholders. C, contribute to solutions. So if we overlay this framework on the gender lens investing definitions, we get to something quite interesting. Getting women to meaningfully participate across the investment value chain. Well, A, avoid harm. Basic risk mitigation, and I'll tell you more why. 2nd, offering products and services that benefit women and girls. Well, that could be B, benefit all stakeholders, or C, contribute to solutions, depending on the business. And the final one, dismantling structural gender inequalities. Well, I'd say that's the highest goal. That's the purpose that we're seeking, especially if we would like a society that works for all. So let's start with the first one, what I call the basics. Getting women to meaningfully participate in the investment value chain. I'll tell you a few data points, and you heard maybe some of them. Let's start with the investments. In venture capital funds, there's only 15% women as partners. In LP, it's even worse. Women have also access to less capital. They manage only 10% of assets under management. They also have less carry. They have less seats on investment committees, and they have a slower progression to becoming partners. What does it look like on the business side? Well, last year, startups in Europe have raised 100 billion. Funds, 20 billion. I would like an estimate of how much venture capital has gone to women-led companies last year. 0.0, well, it's 1%. It's 1%. It's very low. So, well, that's the starting point. Not great, right? But the opportunity is there. The opportunity to fix this is there. It has been demonstrated. Gender diverse teams, they have higher returns, less risk, both at company and fund side. Gender diverse companies also provide greater returns for the same amount of dollars invested. 25% higher valuations, 35% higher ROI at company level. At investors level, VC funds that have increased their female partners have seen 10% better exits, 10% more profitable exits. But this is not just about returns. Companies that are women-led hire more women, they grow faster, they are more innovative. And I'm not talking about impact investment here. This is across the investment industry. And this data comes from studies by Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, BCG, IFC. So anyone or anything that would try and say that they're not doing this, it's just a bad excuse. It's just the basics, right? Fixing gender equality in investment is just doing good business. So let's move on to the second part. Businesses that offer products and services that benefit women and girls. You've heard it. The issues are numerous, major, and worsening. The pandemic has set us back, has erased all progress on gender equality. Women have lost twice as many jobs as men. This is 800 billion loss of income. Education, women's education has been derailed. For instance, half of adolescent girls in sub-Saharan Africa are still remaining out of school. More women have been pushed into extreme poverty. By the end of this year, 380 million women will be living in extreme poverty. That's more than the population of the US. And the list goes on and on and on and on. Well, however, gender lens has already been a crucial strategy before COVID. It has now become a global emergency. According to the UN, you heard it, it could take as long as 300 years if we don't invest in women and girls to get to gender equality. This is the same kind of emergency as climate change. If we don't act now, it will cost us more tomorrow. But investing in gender equality in women and girls is a massive economic opportunity, as well as a game changer. 28 trillion could be added annually to GDP by 2025 if women were to play the same roles as men in the labor market. That's a quarter more GDP annually. Female consumers will control 15 trillion consumer spending in 5 years. That's the largest emerging market in the world. It's twice as big as China and India combined. Supporting women to access all women to access the right kind of financial products and services could unlock 330 billion of annual revenues. The demonstration is here. So what are we waiting for? And don't tell me that there is no pipeline. Gender lens investing has grown 250% at least in both private and public markets. There is more than 50 products in public markets available and more than 200 funds in private markets available. So let's get on to it. And the final dimension is really the systemic dimension, the one, personally, I really care most about, the one around systemic change. Well, gender is an enabler. It is an accelerator for all of the other SDGs. it has been demonstrated that investing in gender lens, in women, can accelerate better outcomes for healthcare, education, food security, and environmental protection. So let's take the example of education. An increase of 10% of girls going to school can add 3% of GDP. Every additional year of schooling for a girl can help her get 20% more income in the future. And that's also helping around lower child mortality, better maternal health, and so on. So the synergies are there. And the synergies are there as well when you invest in climate. So if you invest in off-grid and renewable energy, clean cook stoves, crop insurance that can help female farmers and therefore help increase yields by 20 to 30%. And hence, it can also increase food security, resilience, and so on. So maybe one thing I want to highlight here is what I believe is the next frontier for all of us. It's called intersectionality. So what do I mean by this? Gender and gender equality is a great goal, but we need to understand it's a multidimensional goal. It's the goal that will enable us to get to a society that works for everyone, a society that is socially just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive. Intersectionality is something that helps us understand the complexities of prejudice that people face. The combined effects between social characteristics such as sexual orientation, age, religion, class, and many other dimensions can create different levels of advantage and disadvantage. You might ask, what does it have to do with gender lens investing? Well, actually everything. Because if we don't adopt an intersectional lens, we will fail. At best, we will only perpetuate the systems that have created the inequalities in the first place. So that's my call to action. Let's move from gender lens to an intersectional lens. So where do we start? You can actually take a very simple test. It's called intersectionality score. It takes about 2 seconds. It's super interesting. You can also learn more about what we call JEDI, justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion, and also gender lens investing on different websites, Women Effect, Gender Smart. Actually, the Criterion Institute has a super interesting new framework that came out, which is called, which looks at the power dynamics in investing. Very interesting. And finally, just act. Just join collectives like GLISS, like the 2X Challenge, and many others. I know that the situation is pretty dire. We're not many in this room today, and I want to applaud people who have come to this session. I hope that maybe in a couple of years we will fill the room and people will be standing in the back room. But I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic that we're getting to a new paradigm, a paradigm where more and more people, especially men, value the fact of treating women equally and equitably. My call to action is just do it. Let's walk on the path of being Jedis. It's time, the time has passed for nice commitments. We need to act and we need to see progress on ambitious goals. Investing in women has an exponential multiplier effect. Gender is the new imperative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Who doesn't want to be a Jedi? I think these moments are so important, and I think every time I hear these statistics, I wonder how much more we could be doing to just raise the awareness, because I think a lot of this comes from ignorance, right? And people not being aware of the actions and the role that they can play, because we all have a role to play. And I'm particularly excited about introducing our next speaker. We're now going to dive into a little bit the data side of things, with the tools available to investors, because we often say, we don't have the data. Data is difficult to grasp. And actually, in gender and diversity, it's there. And I'm really excited to have Dana van Maasdijk here today, because I actually had the privilege of speaking with her years ago on the phone about the data set that she and her team have developed. And it's really, really interesting, because it will, I think, allow a lot of investors, if they were using it more, and I think there are quite a lot already using it today, to have that gender lens. So Dana is the co-founder and CEO of Equileap, the leading provider of data and insights on gender equality in the corporate sector. Prior to launching Equileap, Dana worked as a head of philanthropy at ABN AMRO Bank and director of development at Mama Cash, the world's oldest international women's fund. So quite a lot of practical experience deploying this in the field. Dana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here and also to follow Fabienne's really exciting presentation or keynote. Okay, let's see if this works. Yes, it works. So indeed, I am the co-founder and executive director of Equileap. And when I set up Equileap about 6 years ago, it was because I had a background in philanthropy, in women's rights and feminist movements, and I was in touch with ESG investing. And I was thinking, could I create a portfolio that had a gender lens? But actually, when I looked at the data, I couldn't, because the only data that was available was data that reflected women on boards of corporations. And anybody who tells you that their portfolio is gender lens and is only looking at women on boards is not doing gender lens investing. As far as I'm concerned, that's pinkwashing. But at the time, someone said, well, that's the data I can have. And so I quit my job, I set up Equileap, and in the meantime, we've been able to become the largest database of gender equality data. But we are a social enterprise. We're doing this not because we love data or because we love investing. We're doing this because we want to close the gender equality gap in the workplace. And we think that finance and money is an incredible tool to do this quickly. So, what do we have in our database today? We have 4,000 companies, which we bring into our database every year by saying, okay, who's a publicly listed company? Who has a market cap of $2 billion US or more? And who is listed in one of the 23 developed economies? At this moment, we're focusing only on the developed economies, but that gives us 23 countries. We then bring in all these companies and we start researching them on gender equality. And the most important part, I think, is the 19 criteria that we have developed. So this is the sheet that I think is the most important one that I wanted to share with you today. What we did is we created a gender equality scorecard where we were going to look at a company and score them on how they were doing on gender balance and gender equality from their boardroom all the way to the supply chain. The idea of our scorecard is that it really is able to say, okay, this company is doing well or not well or medium, or how are they doing on gender equality? The scorecard has 4 categories, as you can see up here. And each one of those categories is weighted differently. So category A weighs 40% of the final score, category B weighs 30%, category C 20%, and category D 10%. I don't have the time to go into exactly how we came up with these scores, but you can imagine it took us about a year. We looked at the women's empowerment principles, we looked at SDG 5, we looked at feminist theory, and we decided on these weights together with an expert review committee. And the bullet points underneath each one of those categories are the specific data and criteria that we collect. So under board of directors, we're collecting what's the percentage of men and women. And don't get me wrong, we don't give more points for more women, we give more points for gender balance. So when a company has anything between 40 and 60% of men and women, that's when they get 100 points for that specific criteria. Some companies call us and say, oh, but I have so many women on the workforce. You're not giving me 100 points for the workforce. No, and usually I have to point out to these companies that then they have so few women in the executives. So then what is the gender balance there? So it's about gender balance. Category B is my favorite. We look at things like, is the company paying living wages? Many times people ask me why living wages is connected to gender. It has everything to do with it. Most of the women conducting the lowest paid jobs within companies are women. Most of the employees doing the lowest paid jobs are women. And if they're not being paid living wages, like in countries where the minimum wage is not a living wage, like the US or the UK, then they suffer, just like we know that poverty has a female face. We also look at whether a company publishes its pay gap and what it is, parental leave policies for both men and women. We want to see companies giving parental leave to both genders and both parents. And then all these policies, which I'm not going to go through all of them for lack of time, but I think some of the most interesting ones are, does a company supply from women-owned companies? Does the company assure safety in their supply chain from issues like sexual exploitation? Does the company have an anti-sexual harassment policy? So the way we collect all this data is that a team of researchers at Equileap first goes to the company and finds out everything this company has published. Collects from annual reports, corporate social responsibility reports, websites, press releases, and then gathers that data and creates a report. We then send that report to the company and we say, would you care to validate this? And a percentage of the companies every year are getting back to us more and more and saying, yes, I'd like to talk about this because we do have, for example, parental leave policies. And then we say to the company, well, if you publish it, we will take it. And the reason we do this is because we believe that social change can only start with transparency. So we're not going to take the data from a company because they tick a box, but we're going to take the data when they stand out and they say, this is what they have. This engagement that we do with the companies is really great. It's been increasing, and every time we send this letter saying, we're Equileap, we have collected your data, and guess what, we're selling the data to asset managers, and there's so many billion invested with our data, and this is what we have about you. Pretty much that's what the letter they get, and then every year we're seeing more of them come up and say, okay, maybe we should talk. And it's quite crazy, the information that we get about how their compliance team won't let them publish if they have a supplier diversity policy or something like that. And then we tell them, well, your score will be lower. And then they start publishing more and more. So in 2018, somebody was asking me how many clients do we have? In 2018, when we started selling the data, we had 3 clients. And today I'm happy to say that we have close to 50 clients. These are institutional investors, pension funds, asset managers, large banks. They have created ETFs, actively managed accounts, investment portfolios, but also they do shareholder engagement. And that's my favorite type of client because there again, they take our data and have conversations with the companies about why they are, for example, not giving parental leave to secondary caregivers, or why they don't have an anti-sexual harassment policy. So the last minutes, I wanted to share with you some of the data. You've heard a lot earlier, but this is the data we have of the 4,000 companies that we research. Every year, we publish a report that is free for anyone to download from our website. It comes in March. No surprise there. And we publish what we have found about the 4,000 companies, including the names of the top 100 companies. Anybody can download this report, and this is also one of the tools that we feel is very impactful in being able to create change. The trends that we are seeing is that, yes, there have been improvements, and even in the years of COVID, we saw improvements. I wonder what's going to happen with the data of next year, but very, very small. But change comes from regulation. It's clear that the companies that are located in countries that have regulation for gender equality are really doing much better. And the other thing that's very clear is that women in top positions are very, 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 very rare. This is a heat map where you see where the companies are coming from what countries are they coming from that they're scoring the highest. So on the x-axis are 19 criteria, and then here, all the countries. And you see that the ones that are doing best come from not Sweden or Norway, as most people think, but actually France, Spain, Italy. And the reason here is, again, legislation. Quotas for women in leadership positions, publications about the pay gap. And so women working for these companies are doing better. There's more gender balance in those companies than there are in other companies. And I think that this is an interesting one to see of where we are. When it comes to signing the Women's Empowerment Principles, which I forgot to mention is one of the things, hardly anybody's doing it, at least of this group of large companies. These are our top 10 companies in the world, as published here, quite a few financials. The interesting thing here was that Australia, which is number 1, is also 25 of the top 100 companies are from Australia. And here again, the reason is legislation. Since 2012, the Australian government has been forcing companies to be transparent about gender equality. Not even putting quotas, but just saying, be transparent, give me the numbers, give me what you're doing, and we see that that's already helping them to do better. The percentages of women at all levels, like the board, the executives, the senior managers, and the workforce, it's not reaching gender balance at all. But we do see that, for example, in North America, there's more women in the workforce, and in Europe, there's more women in the board. But the numbers are not great, and they're way below gender balance. This one is even, I think, easier to read. Here you see the male and female percentages at all the different levels. And someone was telling us that it was 2% of CEOs in Switzerland are male. It's 5% worldwide of these 4,000 companies. My team has a blast going through the names and coming up with things like saying, there's more CEOs in Japan, male CEOs in Japan called Hiroshi, than female CEOs. There's more male CEOs in Canada called Michael than female CEOs. More male CEOs in the Netherlands called Peter than female. And they go through all the countries. I mean, with these terrible numbers, you have to have fun somewhere. But the thing is, it's pretty sad. And just a week ago, I read that in 2020, the European banks, the 30 largest European banks, made a commitment to the EU saying, we know the numbers are low. We're going to do our very best to increase the number of women in leadership positions in European banks. 2 years later, 14 of those banks have changed CEOs. How many do you think of those 14 CEOs are female? 0. So some people say, I'm so tired of speaking about gender equality or hearing about gender equality, but then I show them these numbers and I'm tired too, but we have to do something to improve this. 18 companies of the 4,000 actually have gender balance, 40 to 60% at all the level. So it is possible. 53% of the companies publish an anti-sexual harassment policy. First time we have more than 50%. Still very low if you think how many years we've had the Me Too movement, and we know that it's rampant, and we know that these companies need to do something about it. Anti-sexual harassment policies, who has them? Again, the companies in countries which are being forced to have them. And the average, the percentage of companies that publish their gender pay gap are 17%. So I'm going to, 19 have closed their gender pay gap, meaning that they have less than 3% pay gap within their company. Again, it's possible, but it's very few out of the 4,000. So after giving you all those sad numbers to look at, I wanted to give you a very nice number to look at. This is the Equalib Top 100 Leaders Index. We created an index by looking at the benchmark, the MSCI World, of 1,600 companies and choosing the 100 companies with the best gender equality. And then this index is being tracked by an ETF of a Swiss bank, actually. These 100 companies are outperforming the benchmark by 75%, by almost 3% every year. So here again, just to end up with the business case that the numbers are bad, but gender equality is something that we need to do, not only for a social reason, but also for great beneficial reasons. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love this. I love this because it's only when we have the data that we can actually make really powerful arguments to change things. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take any questions at this stage because we're running 20 minutes behind, which means the bio break has been scrapped, I've been told by my timekeeper. But if you need to go, of course, we're not going to stop you. We're going to continue on. That was really interesting. And to see that index, right, it's so compelling, right? That is the business case, right? You would think more people would jump on this. The second person that we want to invite to the stage is Ramkumar Narayanan, that was mandated by the GLISS, works for Tameo Research and Investment, mandated to look at the macro piece that we just heard, right? The state of gender diversity in the impact funds. And that was published also in the report that Sarah mentioned before. Kumar he works for Tameo. He brings 15 years of experience in inclusive finance and impact investments, including in developing data collection efforts at fund manager level, as well as reporting on trends and performance patterns. So looking forward to that. Floor is yours.
Thanks, Marie-Laure, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Very happy. A big thanks to the GLISS for providing us, Tameo, the opportunity to speak today and present you with the results of the research that we've been conducting since May. So I'll talk a bit more about, how we've managed to this year integrate gender lens consideration, gender lens investing practices of both fund managers and funds, impact funds operating in the market. So compared to what Diana just presented, I think in terms of the investment value chain, as Marie-Laure mentioned, we are just a step before the investment. So you have the portfolio companies that Diana very impressively has great numbers on. Here we are more talking about the funds potentially could invest in those types of companies, of course, and the fund managers running those funds. So my name is Ramkumar Narayanan. I'm the head of market intelligence and investment solutions at Tameo. So just a quick word about Tameo Impact Fund Solutions. For those of you who don't know the company, we are a relatively young company. We were created back in December 2020. And we are a Swiss-based impact investing specialist that guides fund managers, funds, and investors throughout their impact investing journey. And basically, we provide them with support services, independent support services around research, impact reporting, investment solutions. So today, I'm going to present some key takeaways of the 2022 Private Asset Impact Fund Report. So just first a quick background to set the stage about what this report is about and the work we've been partnering with the GLISS around this research. So this study is in its third edition now. So we've started in 2020, 2021, 2022. We are going to release the full publication in a couple of weeks. This study informs about impact investing strategies in private markets through funds that focus on developing countries. So as you can see from what I just said, it's a very niche segment of analysis within the broader impact investing sector and strategy overall. And this is what really makes it quite unique in terms of what type of data I'm going to show you, which we believe is really scarce in the markets, really helpful, I believe, and what distinguishes this type of study from other initiatives. So this year, thanks to the contribution of the GLISS and the partnership, we've really managed to integrate, both on the financial and impact performance side, also the gender lens consideration and components of fund activities and fund managers running those products. So just before starting, a big thanks to, of course, the report sponsors, because I think it's really important that they are here, these types of companies who are very much anchored into the impact space, and without whom today Tameo wouldn't be able to run these types of annual industry surveys. So first, let me set the stage about what is the universe we are looking at before delving into more about the gender lens components. So at Tameo, the market size that we look at is estimated at $77 billion US. And how do we come up with this number? So it's very different. There's a lot of different types of market sizing exercises. It's not, of course, easy to come up with numbers, accurate numbers. But there are a couple of figures that are, in the industry accepted today, including the GINS $715 billion US that was published a couple of years ago. And what at Tameo we do, since we are looking at a subset of this impact investing world that the GIN produced, what we do, if you look at the right, we trickle down from the 715 billion, and we first remove all the listed instruments, so listed equity, listed debt. We only focus on private assets, and then we also remove all the investment flows to developed countries, so North America, Western Europe, and we really focus our analysis on emerging and frontier markets. And from there, again, we trickle down to flows that go to funds run by specialized fund management companies. And that's where today we estimate at Tameo that this market size is $77 billion US. A bit more information on this specific market. Today we've identified 671 private asset impact funds, collectively run by nearly 350 investment management companies. So the estimated market size is 77 billion. Here you have the breakdown of the funds by primary sector of investment. And just to mention the multi-sector line, which is 205, in fact, it is the multi-sector approaches are the most prevalent in the market today. So a lot of fund products look not only at financing a specific sector in majority of their portfolio, but really diversifying across multiple thematics. Just to point out, so gender is not here. Of course, it's not for us a thematic per se. It's really, again, it fits with what has been said before by Diana, Christina as well. It's really a spectrum. It's cross-border. It's an approach across the investment process of these funds and fund managers. So we look at to deep down on what's going on into these portfolios. So here, this is the sample from the 671 funds that we've managed to collect for the survey this year. So we are nearing 200 funds, which is covering approximately 40% of the market, which is, in itself a record year for Tameo. We've started with 120 funds, 150, 175. This year we are nearly at 200, so we are very happy with the coverage, and we believe it's really a conversation starter in terms of significance of the data that we're going to show, including on gender lens. So just want to point out the line on gender lens consideration here. So 78 funds out of the 198 in our sample have told us that they do have either an actively, marketing, like they promote actively that they are doing gender lens investing, or they are doing gender lens investing but not necessarily putting it forward that much. But still, less than half of the sample, and pretty much what I'm going to present now very much aligns with the gaps that Christina has been talking about and Diana has also been pointing out. So let's get started into the subset of indicators around gender lens. So I'll present 4 slides on fund manager level, gender lens consideration, and 4 slides at the fund level, gender lens consideration. So here, investment manager level first. We've asked the companies participating in our survey about the percentage of the women in their workforce. So this could relate a bit to the category A, I think, that Diana just presented for their companies. So the share of women overall in the organization, we've split the analysis by buckets of FTEs, by investment management companies. And just as a disclaimer, most of our investment managers in the sample, they are either small in size in terms of workforce, so they are from 0 to 50 FTEs. So we can focus maybe the view here on the bottom bars, but overall the takeaway here is that gender parity is almost attained. I would say nearly 50% for the workforce overall, but of course in the leadership positions, in the C-suite, board of directors, and investment committees, very much less, 1/3, even less for in the board, depending on the different buckets. So again, there's a lot of gaps in that front. Again, at an investment management level, we asked for what are the types of different gender diversity initiatives that they have in place. The most prevalent is maternity, paternity leaves, part-time flexible work arrangement. Interestingly, there's not a lot of companies that do any pay equity analysis and result disclosures. And there are 6 companies who don't have any internal initiatives to promote gender diversity. So there's still, a lot of good work going on, but also a lot of gaps. In terms of inclusion, gender diversity and inclusion training policies at the fund management level, again, a striking number. So 27 companies told us, in fact, that they don't have any gender diversity and inclusion training in place in-house. And that's very striking. 14 have once a year a training. Some have some here and there, at least 30 minutes of training. But yeah, again, the striking number is that there's still a lot of companies without any types of training policies in-house. And the final slide on the investment management side is we've asked what are the responsibilities of a dedicated gender diversity team or leader, if there are any at those company levels. So the most is that their role is to report, KPIs to the management, to the senior management on gender diversity. And again, another very high occurrence in our sample is that they don't have any diversity team leader or the diversity team within the company. So here I move now to the 4 slides looking at the analysis at the fund level. So first I'm going to show you what are the motivation from a fund's perspective to adopt a GLI strategy in the investment management process. So here you can read the spider chart clockwise. So we've asked them to rank from 1 to 5, and these are the average scores. So the highest ranked reason is that it's the right thing to do for those who do it. In fact, they told us that it's the right thing to do to address gender inequalities. It's either in line with the sustainability strategies or, very interestingly, and I think today it's very accepted, that SDG 5 is a catalyst for all other SDGs. So they do recognize that, and it is a motivation that drives these funds to adopt a GLI strategy. As part of the investment decisions, so we asked whether they were giving any types of importance to look at gender-related outcomes when they were making an investment decision for these funds. They said it. Most of them said yes. In fact, it is important. 19 of them said yes, but it's not our top impact priority, even within the subsample of those who are doing gender lens. For 36, it is one of the most important decision factor. It's not the unique one, of course. And then we've also asked the funds to map a bit, what they look at when, as part of their investment decision in terms of the 2X challenge criteria. So again here, if you go from the bottom, you can see that only 5 funds said that they look at whether the companies they invest in are founded or co-founded by women. So I think that, again, comes back to the gaps that Christina and Diana were mentioning. But the most prevalent is that on the end beneficiary side, so that's the second, the customers are predominantly women, but also at the portfolio company level, there should be a significant share of women in the workspace. I'm almost done. So just a few stats on the investment flows now. So we've looked a bit on the processes. So what's going on at the portfolio level of these funds. So here I've given a few numbers. So you can see that on average, for those funds who've told us that they are gender lens investment focused, 37 transactions on average for those funds have gender lens criteria. The average ticket size is $2.42 million, and this can be, of course, contrasted depending on the strategy of the fund. So here this, for the whole sample of funds, I haven't shown you the difference between fixed income funds and equity funds, for example, and I believe there will be discrepancies. The geographical breakdown, so a lot of it flows to Asia, in fact, nearly 45%, 21% East Asia Pacific, 23% South Asia, and Latin America takes the bulk at nearly 30%. And in terms of sector breakdown, this comes back to what I said, so gender is not a sector per se, it's really cross-border, but most of the portfolio outstanding at the end of 2021 for Gender Lens Investment Fund is into financial inclusion, and 28% in food and agriculture. And looking forward, really, my final slide. So we've also asked the funds, what are the key external factors that would really are really important for them to be able to attract more investor capital into these funds, or maybe even creating, new fund products. So the impact approach is very important. The perception also of GLI by investors and impact on fundraise. So really, there's a lot of need to educate the investors, really have this dialogue to really have a global understanding of the benefits of doing gender lens investing. There's risk perception, of course. Still, there's a lot of, work to do to be able to communicate on that. And you have all the other reasons ranked from highest to lowest. So that's it for me. These were just a few key highlights on the gender component of the study. The report is going to come out in a couple of weeks. We are really on the final draft, and I invite you to scan the QR code or follow the link. Drop us your email, and once the publication is out, we'll be happy to send it to you by email. Thanks a lot.
I'd like to call up Sarah, who will be moderating the next panel, which is on standards, with her two speakers. That I believe there will be two speakers in the room that are present, and then there will be two that are online. Is that correct? So maybe I'll let you do the introductions, and as you have this in hand. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Is this working? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to welcome on stage, we have here Nicole and David, and Heather and Vanina are already online. Hello, hi. Hi. Right, so why don't you guys come? I've been told that we are short on time and behind schedule, so I'm going to quickly introduce Nicole and David, who are here, but I'm not forgetting you ladies. So Nicole has experience in women's economic empowerment, SME, and social enterprise development for over 20 years. She has supported programs across emerging markets, multiple geographies, and in particular, she introduced the 2X collaborative to the Caribbean, resulting in the launch of the first 2X qualified fund in the Caribbean. She is the 2X collaborative global lead on board diversity and women leadership, and has managed a portfolio of over $20 million, working with public and private sector players in emerging markets. Welcome, Nicole. Then we have David, who's also come with us today. David Pritchett. I'm not actually sure how you pronounce your last name. Pritchett. Okay. David is the managing director at Edge Certified Foundation, which has developed a global standard and certification methodology for organizations to measure gender lens and intersectional equality in their workplace that we discussed earlier, and to benchmark themselves against leading global organizations in order to accelerate their progress towards equitable workplaces. David has been working in sustainability and the ESG space at PwC and accountability before joining the Edge. Remotely, we have our two ladies. So Heather on this side, your left probably. Heather is the global product lead at IFC Gender and Economic Inclusion Group. In this role, she oversees the development and delivery of client solutions for the private sector that support the economic participation of women and individuals at the base of the pyramid. She also leads research for new gender lens investment solutions. And she brings with her 15 years of working experience in international development and financial services in emerging markets. We also have the pleasure to welcome Vanina, who currently serves as consultant, IFI Partnerships and Sustainable Finance at UN Women, where she supports the implementation of UN Women's global strategy to increase sustainable finance for gender equality and women empowerment. She also provides technical expertise for UN Women's engagement with international financial institutions, ministries of finance, public development bank, private sector, and the rest of it. Prior to UN Women, she did technical assistance and research at the World Bank, the IFC, and several consulting firms where she was working generally on sustainable development topics like financial inclusion, social protection, municipal finance, women economic empowerment. Thank you for joining us remotely, ladies. I'm going to sit, I won't see you, but I have a little screen in front of me where I can actually see you. All right, so in this session, we are going to discuss the frameworks around gender lens investment. We've heard the importance of data already, and several initiatives in the industry have emerged around framing what gender lens investment is and how it can be implemented. So I'm going to turn my first question to Heather. So Heather, here for me. Heather, would you please give us an overview maybe of what those gender lens initiatives or those principles or those frameworks are in the industry today and where we stand with the development of such initiatives? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction and also the opportunity to participate in today's discussion virtually. So hello from Kenya. And it's a great question to start off this discussion with. I would say today the field of gender lens investing is benefiting from multiple guidelines and frameworks and certifications. And if you asked this question about 5 years ago, it'd be a very different answer. So there's been quite a bit of progress over the last few years where investors are across asset classes are increasingly adopting strategies to intentionally and measurably use their capital to reduce gender gaps, so the inequalities between men and women, and benefiting from the surgence of these different types of tools. If I were to kind of categorize the landscape, I would categorize it across 3 different activities. There's the assessment, there's the alignment, and then there's the awareness. And we're kind of at all 3 different stages of this. And so under this assessment kind of category, there's been a range of frameworks and guidance that have been developed, ranging from those that are broad, that look across a portfolio or a business's operations, to those that are more nuanced approaches, including certifications that really dive deep into a specific area or a gender gap, so such as maybe access to finance or workplace equity or supplier diversity. And so just to give a few examples to kind of illustrate what I mean on the broader frameworks and principles, we've seen the establishment of the 2X criteria, which has become accepted as an industry standard for investors setting out thresholds for levels of women's participation in business and financial institutions and asset managers. And I know Nicole's here and she'll tell us more about that. And then there's frameworks like the UN WEPs, the Women Empowerment Principles, and these are offering guidance to businesses on how gender equality and women's empowerment can be promoted in the workplace, marketplace, and community. And also what's critical is that alignment with SDG 5 for many companies. And then there's guidelines that have come out. And at IFC, I mean, we've partnered with various organizations to publish step-by-step roadmaps on gender lens investing for fund managers. So for example, with BII, we have a guide that came out that looks at how fund managers can strengthen gender diversity within their own firms, but also incorporate a gender focus into their investment operations. And so those are some examples of these broader frameworks and principles, if you will. But on the more nuanced side is the establishment of verification and certification mechanisms that are critical to help companies and investors kind of assess what gender inequalities they should focus on in their operations and portfolios, but also enables companies to showcase and investors to showcase kind of where they're making progress on gender lens investing. And a great example, as I know we'll hear from David later, is the EDGE Certified Foundation and the work that they're doing specifically on workplace equity. But in the landscape, there's a whole host of other tools that are, such as that are looking at supplier diversity and gender and climate. We've got the gold standard, the W+. And behind a lot of all these tools that we would be remiss to not mention is a lot of the research and data, so that what Equileap is doing and these case studies that are coming out that are to build this evidence base that is needed to be able to develop the right frameworks, to strengthen them, to continuously improve them over time. And so you have efforts such as G-Search, which is a group of impact investors that are building the evidence base for gender lens investing, such as I know Alpha Monday is a part of them as well. And so this is all this assessment phase. You've got all these tools that are available, that are assessed, that enable us to assess our operations broadly and then get nuanced. But key to all of these is the alignment. And so principles, frameworks, verifications, this is all needed to support the development of the industry by establishing a common discipline around criteria, reporting impact, maintaining the integrity of how a gender lens can be applied in the market. And there's 3 areas of alignment in the landscape that we're seeing. I mean, one is around the industry bodies and initiatives, such as the 2X Collaborative and the 2X Challenge that brought stakeholders together to make commitments and calls to actions. The other layer is alignment across these tools and criteria. So we see examples such as the Joint Impact Indicators, which is a set of high-level indicators that impact investors are using. And these now include indicators on gender, and they're aligned with IRIS+, which is managed by the Global Impact Investing Network, and that is then aligned with the 2X criteria. So there's alignment on the tools that is happening. And then lastly, it's alignment with existing principles and standards that were already existing that may not explicitly look at gender. So for example, we recently came out with a guide on bonds with UN Women. I know Vanina will talk a little bit more about that, but that was a guide for bond issuers and for social bonds. And that the guidance there was aligned with frameworks such as the social bond principles, the sustainability bond guidelines. And so it's critical that what's coming out on gender is also aligned with existing frameworks. So alignment is a key aspect that's happening right now. And then lastly, on awareness, which is why we're all here today, is the industry is moving, and it's critical for us to create an awareness of these tools and frameworks and principles that are available, but also which ones to use when. And so excited that we're here today to get deeper into the topic. So hopefully that gives a good sense of the landscape, the tools that are available, and some examples.
Thank you, Heather. So indeed, many tools that have been developed and a real effort to align with other existing frameworks that are already available on the market. I suggest with the remaining time that we have, which is only 8 minutes 42, we dive into some specificities of the initiatives that each of our panelists is working on. So I'd like to start with Vanina. So Vanina up there, Heather has mentioned the UN Women's work on bond in partnership with the IFC. Do you want to take us through that and, highlight maybe the structure and how it works and how it did help crowd in private capital?
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So from UN Women's perspective, it is very important that finance be leveraged to bring capital to address gender inequalities, both at scale and in a meaningful way that actually transforms women's and girls' lives. And this is why we spent quite a bit of time on the bond as a promising asset class, where that could happen both at scale and lead to true impact and change for women and girls around the world. So within that context, and Heather mentioned it, we collaborated last year together with IFC and the International Capital Market Association to really show to the sustainable finance stakeholders how they could actually meaningfully address gender equality through debt capital and in alignment with the bond principles published by ICMA. So what we did essentially was to take these three reference principles of the social bond principles, the sustainability bond guidelines, or the sustainability linked bond principles, and marry that with the global norms and standards for gender equality, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goal 5, or UN-led women's empowerment principles, and also the emerging and very forceful standards and guidance around gender lens investing, such as the 2X criteria and some other reference frameworks that we mentioned, and the OECD gender equality policy marker. So concretely, a gender bond could be any of these types of bonds, as long as it uses either a use of proceed approach in which gender equality project categories are clearly predetermined and defined in the bond framework. It could be along a social bond or sustainability bond along with green environmental project categories, or it could follow an outcome-based approach under a sustainability linked bond. And there, the structure of the bond actually is linked to the achievement by the issuer on the predetermined KPIs around gender equality or sustainability performance targets. So we wanted to show that there are many fronts on which to tackle gender equality through sustainable debt, and that's information that is useful not only for the issuers, but also for the investors, the arrangers, the underwriters, the second-party opinion providers. And at the systemic level, a lot can be done through public sector bond issuances to tackle the structural causes and consequences of gender inequality. And to give you a few examples, that could mean investing in the care economy, including in public childcare or elder care services. It could mean improving access to services that prevent and respond to violence against women and girls. For private sector issuances, the gender gaps can be reduced in different fronts as well, on different fronts in the workplace, in the marketplace, or in the community. And some of the examples could be to, we're hearing a lot about certification. So it could be around conducting a rigorous company-wide gender assessment and maintaining an active certification on gender equality. It could be around tackling the gender pay gap in companies. And it could also mean implementing supplier development programs to help women-owned businesses access and meet the procurement requirements of the company. So this guide pushes the GLI agenda. The interesting thing about it is that it references several of the diverse gender equality framework that we have mentioned throughout the session already and that you will hear more about. It's not focused on just one. We seek to align and harmonize. Again, the understanding of the fact that gender equality is multidimensional. And through the adherence to the ICMA bond principles, and that really aligns with UN Women's views, we place a lot of emphasis on post-issuance reporting so that the issuer can attest about their concrete actions to advance gender equality.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to build on this necessity to align and move on to the next question for Davy. I've also seen there is a question from the audience on regulation. You can send your question on Slido, and we'll do our best to address some of those questions. On regulation specifically, David, can you tell us what obviously your methodology entails, but also how it aligns with emerging regulations?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I think we're short on time, so I'll cut the presentation brief and focus on a snapshot of what the EDGE certification entails, perhaps a little bit on some of the organizations that are EDGE certified to give you a sense of what kind of organizations we're working with, and the alignment question, because that's on top of everyone's mind at the moment. The EDGE certification is a global standard and an assessment methodology which measures gender and intersectional equity in the workplace for organizations of 200 plus employees. It also is accompanied by a certification requirements and guidelines. So that's a mandatory part of the standards. There's three components in the EDGE certification journey. The first one is that organizations measure themselves against the EDGE standards. They measure themselves. The standards are built around 4 fundamental pillars. So we've seen a lot of these. Diana presented those earlier. We've got one of the pillars is around representation at different levels of responsibility, representation within different job types. The second pillar is around pay equity. An organization has to undertake a pay equity analysis, a statistical analysis which is compliant with the EDGE methodology. The third pillar is around implementation of effective policies and practices to support equitable career flows in the workplace. And the fourth pillar is around measuring employee experience or employee perceptions and understanding the inclusivity of employees. So really a framework which is very much covering the broad spectrum of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you've got the diversity with the representation, and you've got the equity with regard to pay equity and the policies and practices and the implementation, and the inclusion with regard to the employee survey. So a holistic, comprehensive framework for an organization to understand where they stand and what are the underlying factors which drive a specific status quo within an organization on gender and intersectional equity. Who do we work with? We work with 250 organizations globally, covering 50 countries, around 25 industry sectors. So very broad, global relevance. We work with country entities of multinationals, such as Nestlé, such as Dow, such as Chevron, such as Philips, such as Zurich Insurance, or IKEA, for example. We work with UN agencies, UN organizations, such as UNDP, UNICEF, UNFPA, etc. We work with MFIs and DFIs, so the development finance institutions and multilateral development finance institutions, such as the IFC are certified, World Bank, EBRD, European Investment Bank, etc. And we work with some financial services players, institutional investors or asset managers who are also EDGE certified themselves. They are walking the talk, or as we heard earlier, trying to run the talk. Pictet, Lombard-Odier, many asset managers in Canada, such as CPP Investments, Ardian in France, CDPQ, OTPP, etc. So a lot of movement in the financial sector to become EDGE certified. We're working with IFC in emerging markets. This is obviously a growing topic in emerging markets, and we're proud to be partnered by IFC, who roll out the EDGE certification methodology within emerging markets in Africa and South America and Asia markets primarily. A little bit on the alignment, just to finish off. We've talked a little bit about emerging regulation. Interesting, Diana's statistics showed France, Italy, Spain, Switzerland quite high up on the numbers. There is emerging regulation in those countries, be it around pay equity or gender equality acts per se. In Switzerland, there's the Gender Equality Act, which has now stipulated equal pay analysis for organizations since July 2020. Our methodology is scientifically and legally validated to be compliant with the Swiss requirements. So any organization, becoming EDGE certified complies with the Swiss law. Similarly, in Italy, with the recent UNI 125 pre-standard, they call it, and certification requirements, there's an equivalency with EDGE. So becoming EDGE certified will enable an organization in Italy to say that they comply with the UNI regulations. The same in Spain with the royal decrees around equal salary, equal pay, and equal actions. And in capital markets, that's where we're aligning quite strongly. Diana showed earlier very pictorially the issue with gender audits on her heat map. You will have noticed that the right-hand column on gender audits was fully red for every country, which means there's a lot of work to do for organizations to actually go through an independent third-party audit on their data to show that they have integrity and credibility behind the numbers that they're actually providing to data and research and analysis organizations such as Equileap. With Bloomberg, for example, their gender equality index, they have a question in their assessment methodology asking organizations if they are EDGE certified. Organizations can thereby score more points in such an assessment and get access to obviously to the products. Similarly with S&P Global, finally. S&P Global, who have the corporate sustainability assessment, which triggers the DGSI indexes, which is much sought after amongst the Fortune 5,000 companies. We align our methodology with their methodology, and the questions that are asked in their assessment are also EDGE questions because we share information with them. So it's coming together, and I think it's important that it does come together. We've had a bit of a proliferation, and I think that there's room for us all to come together to focus around the same comparable indicators so that the financial market can actually compare consistent definitions.
Thank you, David. On coming together, Nicole, would you guide us quickly through the 2X collaborative and 2X certification effort, which has bring also a lot of the industry together? And you have -3 minutes to do that.
Less than -3 minutes. So let me just give a little bit of context in terms of what is a 2X collaborative. I think many people may already know about the 2X challenge that was started in 2018 by the G7 DFIs, also in terms of the success of that vis-a-vis the targets that were set being significantly overshot from 3.9 billion to currently 11 billion and really targeting towards 15 billion. I think some of what I can reinforce in terms of, we heard a lot of discussion here about the 2X criteria, but I think one of, in the very limited time that I have, that I can focus on in terms of the key strategic priorities for the 2X collaborative, which really is that global gender lens industry body, is about enhancing investors' capacity to deploy gender-smart capital, mobilizing more commitments, of course, significantly beyond the 15 billion on GLI, and aligning standards on best-in-class gender finance. Bringing it current to 2022, there's a huge announcement, I think it's probably already been made, vis-a-vis the merger of Gender Smart with the 2X Collaborative. I'm sure we'll be seeing many colleagues who are here and others at the Gender Smart meeting that's coming up in a few weeks in London. But one of the big areas vis-a-vis alignment and discussion on the certification, some of what David just spoke about and what other colleagues have spoken about before, is the announcement that was made at the G7 meeting of this year in June vis-a-vis the importance of a co-creation opportunity to really craft what would be represented as 2X certified and 2X certification. And so I think in the very limited time, let me just touch on why there is a need for that 2X certification. The importance of the co-creation is for it to be industry shaped, for it to bring about an independent, universally available mechanism that would allow for demand verification by a third party to ensure transparency, credibility, and of course, impact on gender lens investing and to provide a best-in-class benchmarking. So in terms of that co-creation, I will just go very quickly to what I know you will not be able to ask me as the last question is, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here is the call to action. So the call to action from 2X Collaborative is for those here and others to join 2X Collaborative, 2xcollaborative.org, but most importantly, to join the co-creation of what will be the 2X certification, to ensure that there is buy-in and to ensure that there is responsiveness for all the different categories and stakeholder groups.
Fantastic.
Done?
Thank you. Perfect. So an opportunity for all of those interested to join into this co-creation. So I need to turn to Kelly to know how much more overtime do we have to do justice for our next panel. 0. Sure. So I think it's important that in case after this session you are interested in reaching out to the panelists individually to learn more about their work and how they align and how they push the gender lens investment agenda, please do so. They're all available on LinkedIn. We had planned, just so you know, in case you're interested to discuss that with them privately, we had a plan to discuss how we can crowd in the private sector now that all these initiatives are starting to align and are starting to come together, because in the end, this is what we want. We want to ensure that as much private capital can be channeled to close this gender gap. Also, in this entire session so far, gender has been defined as men and women. Obviously, in terms of what's coming next, this is all the other colors, the LGBTQ that we've not even touched upon. I suggest we stop here. There was one question from Slido, but again, I think we should do justice to our practitioners who've also come to present concrete ways to invest with a gender lens approach. So I suggest that we stop here for our panel. Thank you, ladies, for joining us remotely. Thank you, David and Nicole. I know that there was a lot more we wanted to discuss, but that can happen after the panel. Thank you.
C'est ça pour que les gens restent.
Hello, I'm Sadia Mateen, co-founder of beshideshi.com, the biggest online marketplace for made in Bangladesh products.
I am Janina. I was born and raised in Vilas and Periyar, India.
We started Beshideshi back in 2018 with a vision to promote Bangladeshi products and local artisans both nationally and internationally.
BAB est le premier centre de formation au métier de la petite enfance au Sénégal.
Women in Digital is an all-star team of female technologists dedicated to bring more women into the digital economy.
Women-owned businesses in Bangladesh need better access to the market and easier value chain to boost inclusive growth.
Les défis ont été nombreux. Le premier défi sur le plan social. Une femme entrepreneur, une femme qui doit gérer son foyer et surtout l'incompréhension de ce choix. Mais également, en troisième point, la difficulté de trouver une ingénierie existante.
Women are significantly underutilized in the digital economy. Many women don't have financial independence.
With Beshideshi, we are trying to eradicate the impediments faced by rural artisans, especially women, involved in making made in Bangladesh products while conducting business independently. Over the last few years, Beshideshi has successfully facilitated local women entrepreneurs by giving them an online platform to sell their products to a bigger TG, both nationally and internationally. In addition to this online platform for selling, we also provide them with skill development training, support in finance, business operation, delivery management, end-to-end delivery to the customers, anything and everything that they require to sustain their business and to run their business efficiently.
Avoir l'opportunité d'avoir son enfant qui est bien pris en charge sur le volet nutritionnel, sur le volet soins et hygiène et sur le volet apprentissage précoce et la stimulation est une bonne opportunité pour ces femmes-là.
We educated women in digital in Bangladesh and give them jobs through our software company and other marketplaces.
A sustainable and thriving business for a woman will ensure financial stability, better access to education, and healthcare for the whole family.
Aujourd'hui, l'IAB impacte la communauté, surtout féminine, à 99%. Le fait pour une femme d'avoir un endroit, un lieu où déposer son enfant qui la tranquillise, lui permet de contribuer à l'économie du pays, lui permet de prendre soin de sa famille.
In our business, the impact we have seen, girls are gained their tech knowledge, they become financially independent, they support their family, they get confident about tech job, and we are minimizing the child marriage problem. Marginalized women also working in the tech industry, and especially in rural women, and many of women become role model for other women.
With further investment, we want to bring entrepreneurs from all over the country into this platform and find opportunity to create a mark for themselves in the society.
Nous souhaiterions que les partenaires puissent nous accompagner à développer ce modèle, à le déployer dans l'ensemble des régions et à pouvoir autonomiser davantage de femmes. Rien qu'à Saint-Louis, notre projet pourrait impacter plus de 1 million de personnes. Alors, donner à chaque enfant l'opportunité d'un bon départ pour la vie. Donner à chaque femme l'opportunité de pouvoir subvenir à ses besoins et d'aller pouvoir travailler tranquille.
We cannot expand our business and can't support more women because of financial crisis. So if we get the investment, we can expand our business and we'll be able to accommodate more women and girls and make them financially independent too. Investing in women is key for the digital economy and the digital growth of the country. A digital economy without the full participation of women can't scale the reach its potential. Investing in women is not only good policy, it's good economics.
Investing in women is not only good policy, it's good economics. Those were testimonies from 3 enterprises that Oxfam has invested in over recent years. Oxfam had been running enterprise development programs for 15 years and has established a track record of origination, investment, and impact on women's economic empowerment in enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and Latin America. To date, we have supported 55 small and medium enterprises across 22 countries with low historic default rates, impacting the lives of 80,000 rural households, including 38,000 women. Enterprises have been supported across agriculture, online trading, waste management, and green products, with examples including organic peanut exporter in Bolivia, online marketplace, and IT business training in Bangladesh, as we've just seen. For every $1 invested in the program, it has generated over $3 in increased profits from enterprise and increased wages and income for producers. In the next phase, Oxfam is building on this work by developing a global high-impact blended finance vehicle in partnership with an investment manager to be announced soon. The program aims to provide a return for investors as well as attracting new philanthropic capital. It is expected that the blended finance vehicle will be backed by guarantees and aimed at investors globally. The initial pilot will run in 3-4 countries and be $4 million in investment alongside $4 million of grant, with increased sizes of subsequent bonds to scale to $50 million over 10 years. Thank you.
That was Roland Chauville from Oxfam. After this really inspiring video of how you can really impact women on the ground, I'd like to call now for the final panel of the day, Martha Ra, who is the co-founder of Women in Sustainable Finance, an international network launched with the goal to transform the financial industry and to inspire women to share the same vision. This panel will really plunge into the products and solutions that we can invest in as investors. She is joined by Christina Huaz, Paul Haley, Camille Bayret, and Teresa Gardans that she will introduce.
Thank you very much for having us here today. We are very aware of the time, so we'll be very efficient now. Let's jump in. We have practitioners here sitting who are going to represent and introduce us to very interesting funds that they are managing. So on the left-hand side of me is Christina Juhasz, who is from Women's World Banking Capital Partners Fund she will be representing. She's the Chief Investment Officer. Then further to the left, we have founding partner of Oryx Impact Fund, Teresa Gardans. Then our gentleman on the panel, Paul Haley, Head of Impact and ESG of Responsibility, who will speak about the access to clean power fund. Apologies. And then we have on the very left-hand side, Camille Bayret. She is ESG analyst and she will be speaking about Mirova Women Leaders Equity Fund. So I would like to ask all of you if you could please start to introduce your fund, 3 minutes each, please.
Thank you. So yes, I'm CJ Juhasz, Chief Investment Officer of Women's World Banking. We have 2 funds under management, Women's World Banking Asset Management, sorry. We have 2 funds under the management. The fund we're currently investing is $100 million. And our investing strategy is to find innovative financial inclusion companies, and through investing in those companies, try to close that stubborn gender gap in financial inclusion. So our goal is every company that we invest in, wherever they are today, in terms of percentage women served by each of their products, we want to move that dial up towards 50% if it's not already there. And similarly in their workforce, we look at every level of the workforce, from entry level to senior management. Wherever they are today, we'll work with them during our investments to move that dial up. And we provide the market research and the landscape research to give them advice and guidance on how to do that. And that is also our value creation strategy, because we know gender diverse teams deliver good financial results. And if you are gearing your products to go after those underserved women, you're going after the largest market, the largest untapped market still. And so the growth opportunity should be there as well. And that's our strategy.
Thank you very much, Christina. Over to you, Teresa.
Yes, hi, I'm Teresa Gardans. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm the founding partner, co-founder of Oryx Impact. We're a female-led impact investing house, and we're launching a gender lens fund of fund to invest into impact funds in Africa. There's been a lot of talk about Africa, and I was just seeing from your research today how 14% of the funds that you were doing your research on are investing in Africa. By 2050, a fourth of the world population will be in Africa. It's estimated that a third of the world population by 2100 will be in Africa. The average age of the African inhabitant is 19.7 years of age, so we have a very young population, very fastly growing. 1 billion people expected to live in cities by 2050, the largest urbanization rate. The continent worst hit by climate change, 105 million migrants due to climate reasons only by the year 2050 as well. And girls, women, and minorities will be the worst affected by that. So there's a lot to be invested in Africa via impact investing. We believe there are lots of challenges that can be transformed into opportunities as well with impact investing. But billions have to go into creating more sustainable, resilient societies. More private capital needs to go into Africa. And at Oryx Impact, we want to mobilize private capital to the African continent with a gender lens. And that means that we seek to intentionally and measurably use capital to address gender inequities in the continent. How do we want to articulate that? We want to articulate that via fund of fund. Why is capital not reaching Africa? What are people finding so difficult to go and invest in Africa? Because we talk about impact investing, but impact should go where impact is needed. And it's really needed in the African continent. So we thought, if we create a fund of fund, would we help investors to feel less threatened by the perceived risks? Would we diminish the risk of investing in Africa, by diversifying the portfolio across asset classes, across geographies, across different sectors? Would we enhance impact by creating a transparent impact measuring system, by applying impact from the start, from fund selection to reporting? And could we scale the impact by fostering and strengthening the ecosystem on female fund management? Over the last 2 years, we've spoken to 225 fund managers in the African continent with an impact intentionality. And we can very happily say that more than half of them are being led by female teams. In the venture capital space, in the private equity space, and in the private debt space. Why is this so relevant? Because we believe that female fund managers are more inclined to invest into products and services also geared towards women and girls. And we're launching, parallel to our fund, a technical assistance facility to help those fund managers, female fund managers, emerging fund managers, to measure and track their ESG and impact measurement and management that we believe will make them stronger and be able to professionalize their investment as well, and be able to attract more capital, because capital is demanding more transparency, more data, to have that more solidly grounded, and also to trickle it down into the SMEs into which they are investing.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you. Well, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for coming along. My name is Paul Haley. I'm the head of impact and ESG at Responsibility, and Responsibility is a fund manager based in Zurich, which primarily focuses on impact investing via private debt and private equity in developing countries. And the fund, we manage a variety of different funds and products. The fund I wanted to talk about was the Access to Clean Power Fund. And this is a fund that we launched in 2019, which focuses on providing debt financing to organizations, to companies that provide off-grid solar solutions, either to households, primarily households in rural Africa or rural India, or to SMEs in those same areas. And I think the reason why I wanted to pick this fund, because obviously we were asked, well, what fund would you like to talk about, is that this was a fund where we introduced a gender-smart approach. So as you've probably heard, this isn't a primarily gender-focused fund, but we worked together with a consultancy called Sagana, who helped us to, and with the support of two of our investors, FMO and EIB, to introduce a gender-smart approach to our investments, to really try and support our investee companies to introduce better practices within their workplace with regard to female employees, female management, and overall their practices towards female clients. The lessons that we learned in doing so, and the tools that were developed, have been really instrumental in helping us to develop similar products with gender-smart approaches in other areas. So since then, I think it's 2 other products that we've launched that have managed to incorporate a gender-smart approach. We have a couple of other that are on the way as well. So really, this whole experience has been instrumental in helping us to define our approach, which I think is quite interesting. We're a specialist impact investor. We've been founded in 2003. We should know how to do this, right? So the fact that it took a moment like this, an experience like this, to teach us, okay, this is how you adopt a gender-smart approach. These are the tools you need to put in place. was quite eye-opening for us. And I think hopefully will be to the benefit of our investee companies and their clients.
Thank you very much, Paul. Over to you, Camille.
Does this work? Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Camille Barré. I'm an ESG analyst at Merova. So maybe quickly, Merova is an affiliate of Natixis Investment Managers. We're based in Paris, and we're fully dedicated to sustainable investment. We're quite young. We were created 10 years ago. We're a mission-driven company, or Société à Mission for the French speakers. We're a B Corp label certified. And all of our funds are Article 9. So that's kind of also important to say, is because the fund I'm going to talk about, so we both do public equity but also private, but the fund we're talking about today is a public equity one, so the Women's Leader Equity Strategy that was funded in 2019 also, so 3 years ago, because in the beginning, as a lot of asset managers, we were focusing on mostly environment, and we wanted to go towards a social impact. We have two funds on the social, one that is on employment in France, but we're not talking about that today, we're talking about women. As Diana mentioned, our fund looks not at the board of directors, we look at executive committee, leadership committee, has many different names, but that is what we want to look at, is the top management. Why? Well, the glass ceiling, the sticky flooring, so many different names, but we want to know how women are evolving in the company. So that's why we have, so we'll talk about, I think, in more details, quantitative and qualitative screening for the companies that we invest in. But so that's why I mentioned we are Article 9. We have to have an impact on the SDGs, so have a positive impact on environmental and social, but also have that gender lens investing, which makes it not always easy to find companies that are both environmentally have a good impact, but also are great in their diversity. That reduces so much the scope that we can invest in, which is sad because, I mean, it's been mentioned so many times and we'll probably mention it again, but diversity in a company brings innovation, brings more economic, performance. So it should, and they care about the environment. So it's all a mix, everything is linked, but it's not that easy to find. So that's why we wanted to focus on that, and that's why we're here today.
Thank you very much, Camille. So we have heard today already why gender lens investing is definitely a business case, so I think we don't have to speak about it again and repeat it. And we have also heard that we need more than 150 years to reach gender lens equality. But still, I would like to hear from you, what trends and interconnections do you see while investing in gender equality?
So one of the trends I think that's great about where gender lens investing is going is it started very much putting portfolios together, sort of stock picking companies that were either gender diverse or had products or services that were serving women. I think we're going further now, and we're trying to influence the companies that we're invested in to go deeper on towards gender parity. And the performance measurement is getting better, so holding ourselves accountable to high standards as gender lens investors is another important trend. We're definitely seeing some interesting intersectionalities in our portfolio companies. One of my favorite is we invest in a vehicle finance company, a two-wheeler finance company that's a traditionally male-owned model, but women and mobility is a very important empowerment connection. So a woman who has access to a two-wheeler is safer. She can get away from a bad situation. Her time poverty is reduced. She can get to work or schooling opportunities. But it's still very male-dominated. So in their whole portfolio, they've only got 10% women. But they're also financing EVs, electric vehicles, and there it's double, it's 20% women. So that's a really interesting connection too on gender and climate.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, what we saw is at the beginning, we saw that it was very much sort of gender lens investing was investing into female enterprises, then into products and services geared towards women and girls, and now more into policy. So now gender lens investing is about combining the three, which is really relevant as well. And what we are seeing, there's a great intersectionality between gender and climate. In Africa is very much a case in point because lots of women are employed in the agricultural sector in the African continent, and that's where climate really hits. And we need to invest in solutions for women in Africa related to gender. I'm sorry, related to climate. We see as well an intersectionality between health and healthcare and gender, education and gender. So yeah, I mean, gender is not a vertical, it's a horizontal that we definitely need to invest in. Yeah.
Paul, what interconnections do you see?
Well, I would say in terms of trends, I'd speak briefly, I know, of two elements. One is at the level of investors, which is to say that we are getting, versus say 2 or 3 years, I spend a lot of time in investor due diligences. Versus 2 or 3 years ago, the number of investors that are really asking, not just asking generally about, oh, by the way, do you do this, but really going into this question in detail, has changed a lot. The number of very detailed questionnaires on the topic of, how do you address the topic of gender in your product, even if it's not explicitly a gender lens product, has really risen. And I think that's, a lot of that can be ascribed to the influence of 2X, and I think especially the DFIs. So if you have a blended product, obviously DFIs, they often tend to be the ones who are taking concessional funding. Therefore, they have a very substantial voice, and they are very much being pushed by the 2X initiative and by their pledges under that to really ask a lot of questions and to really make their voices heard. The other thing that I would say is on the level of investees. And here, ACPF is quite a good example in the sense that we found that those companies that were providing off-grid solar home solutions, so dealing with selling to individuals, they were by and large more mature companies. They were a little bit more developed. They'd also had a lot of experience of quote-unquote social investors. So when it came to engaging with them, they were very open to the topic, but they were also quite well developed in terms of their internal HR policies. What I found interesting is that the DGC&I, so the companies providing solutions to SMEs, these tended to be companies that weren't quite that were a bit more new. It's more of a new space. And so it means that on a practical level, purely practical level, their setup with regard to female employees, the HR policies they have in place and everything else, tends to be less developed not because of any ill will, but because they're less well-developed companies. So the broader lesson that I would extrapolate from that is that when we have all of these new areas that we're moving into in terms of impact investing, when we have all these new possibilities in terms of that are offered, whether it be things like e-mobility, whether it be things like fintech, I think we really have to be conscious of the fact that by and large their own internal structures when it comes to the topic of gender equality, anti-harassment policies and everything else often aren't as well developed. And so it's something that we need to look at very closely.
Thank you very much, Paul. Camille?
I think I'll just talk about the trend quickly, mostly on the corporate side. What we observe, there's been a surge of chief diversity officers that's been coming out in the past 2 or 3 years. I can see Paul laughing. Yeah, we've been seeing that a lot, mostly in the US. But we've also, and it's something that we're also looking with our fund, is that companies are good on gender diversity or good on diversity as a whole, ethic-wise, and also disabilities, something that is also overlooked at. So it's something that we are seeing also growing. A lot more companies are publishing on the subject, are looking more than gender. They are seeing that it is important to not just think about that, but just to look globally, starting to have targets also. So we are seeing a trend that it's coming, but it depends on where, in which countries. And that's something that we really want to see more. And it's, as an investor in public equity, it's difficult because we are supposed to have a more diverse portfolio, but we can't actually invest in certain countries because they do not publish about it. So we see a trend going, but there still need a lot to be done.
Thank you very much, Camille.
Sorry, just one quick
yes,
thing.
Please.
One thing that we're finding popping up recently is a lot of female-led venture capital firms erupting in the African continent, which is really exciting because it's technologies, access to things, it's, access to healthcare, to clean energy, to financial inclusion as well, to education. And many of those teams are being led by females, which is very, very good news.
Thank you for that remark. Being mindful of the time, I would like to hand over the final remarks to you. So your closing comments, from your perspective, what are the opportunities and constraints on managing gender lens investment product? Please.
Well, I think the opportunities are enormous, and the returns are still to be learned, right? So a lot of the investing funds, the gender lens funds, are still at an early stage. And so as we get more funds online and as they mature, I think we'll have a lot more data points on how this really is good for business, and I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think data is really important, but also communication and education. People need to understand how to invest with a gender lens, what the opportunities are, what the options are, how can you do it? Because one shouldn't take for granted that people know what one is talking about. There's a lot of education involved, I think.
I think from experience, I would say that probably some of the hardest work we're going to have to do is just educating people within the financial sector. And I speak as someone who has worked, I've been working in impact investing for 11 or 12 years, but before that I did work in quote-unquote conventional financing. I feel that there's still an awful lot of way to go in terms of convincing some corners of our financial sector that this is really, as you said, this isn't just a question of, okay, this is what's right to do. This is a tremendous opportunity. So I think this is something we're going to have to work hard on, but I hope that piece by piece we're getting there.
It's hard to add more. We talked about data awareness. I think awareness in the financial sector, but also awareness of companies. A lot of companies still look at us and ask, why is it important to follow gender diversity? So I think it's something that we're engaging a lot. We co-founded the French 30% Club with other asset managers to push the SBF 120 companies to have 30% of women in the executive committee. So it's still something that needs to be said. But to finish, I think on a more positive note, the fact that as an investor, we have to look for companies that are having a good impact both on ESG and gender lens. We get to find some pretty beautiful companies too, and that is always very rewarding. We have one that we love is Sunrun, for example, #1 retailer of residential solar in the US, led by a woman CEO, 56% of women in their executive committee have met the gender pay gap. So that world exists, and it's beautiful to be part of it and to invest in it. So lots of things.
That's a very nice close. I cannot add anything to it. I would like to thank all of our practitioners for sharing their experience today, and I think the call to action is very clear. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that panel. We're going towards the end, and we're practically on time again, so thank you so much. I love this notion of using also gender data as a proxy for the openness of a culture generally within an organization, because you often find that those are linked. So again, and the points on, actually it allows you to identify opportunities in the market that other investors aren't necessarily seeing. For our last part of the day is a fireside chat between Anne-Marion Bouchacourt, that is the chair and board of directors at Société Générale Private Banking, but also recently joined the board of Swiss Sustainable Finance, that has decided to actually gender balance the board. So that's actually quite interesting to go into. And this will be moderated by Kazmira Jefford from Geneva Solutions.
Well, firstly, thanks to everyone here, and Anne, it's very nice to meet you. This is the first time we're meeting on stage. So,
yeah, nice to meet you too.
And I don't know about you, but usually when I'm by the fireside, this is called a fireside chat, I normally stay for a good hour, but we're going to have to make do with 10 minutes. So I've got some...
Yeah, no problem.
So this is a little bit of a different discussion to the ones we've had before. We're going to use these 10 minutes to really have a bit more of your personal insight of some of the challenges and opportunities that women in finance face and your own experience. And we heard a little bit about your titles just now, but you're a board member for Swiss Sustainable Finance. Before, you also spent quite a few years in China as a group chief country officer there. Before then, you were also head of group human resources for many years, and you started your career as an auditor for PricewaterhouseCoopers. So, long, very interesting career. So just to transition with the panels that we've just heard, I want to start by asking you for your comments, really, that any comments from those panels that really resonated with you and your experience as a woman in finance, or just more generally around this conversation of investing in women?
Well, I think women should help women, you know, and in fact, when you get through it, and I am at the end of my career, so, you know, I have gone through a lot of things. It's a hard time. So I think there are men helping you on the way. I had men helping me. But it's, you know, you don't have the clue. The key is how to go forward. And I think in all environments, it's important that women help each other. So I was very, you know, interested to see the initiative in Africa in particular. And I myself, I help some, you know, women helping women in Africa. So it's something that really, but there are, you know, people with issues and difficulties, and a lot of women, if you speak of South America, you have also the same type of things. And but the other thing I see that there are plenty of, it's women who care very often. And what you see is you find a lot of women trying to help and doing good in the world, which is good. Yeah.
And can you share with us maybe 3 moments from your career that stood out either as a woman with a career in the finance industry or because of a challenge you faced or something that inspired you?
So there was one time I was expecting my 4th daughter, and I was told I would not become a partner and I would have to wait for 3 years. You know, all the other guys on my level, and I was performing exactly like the other guys, but I was just having my 4th daughter, so that was not normal. So, and even a partner told me it's how you become misogyne. I don't know the word in English, but... Misogynist? Yeah. But, you know, so that was one example. I had one which was extremely positive. I became head of HR for the group Société Générale because the CEO and chairman at the time wanted to promote women. And it was difficult. He was not finding women, etc. And at some point, I was the head of HR. I had been hired 2 years before as the head of HR for the corporate and investment bank by the guy who was the head of the corporate and investment bank. And in fact, I had been working as a partner, as a consultant, you know, for 3 years with him on a big transformation project. And he said, well, come there. You don't know anything about HR, but we have plenty of strategic issues to manage, so you will help, and then we will see where you go. And so I had done 2 years. The guy who was the head of HR for the group was retiring, and he was not seeing any succession coming. So at some point, he called me and said, would you take my job? And I must say, being a woman, I was not that interested. I was thinking, you know, I'm very happy where I am, etc. But everybody had told me you have to say yes, so I said yes. And then a week later, I also spoke to my direct boss, who was the head of the corporate and investment bank. And he told me, you didn't ask for anything. I didn't speak for you. But if you want, I can speak to the CEO. So he did it. A week later, I saw the CEO. There was some turmoil in between, but at the end, I was made global head of HR. And so that was an interesting and positive thing. And I would say a last, also very positive thing, when I was made the global head of HR, I was starting, and I very well remember, on the 2nd of November, and I was starting by a remuneration committee. I was a secretary for the board on the remuneration committee, and nobody had told me anything. The guy going for retirement had told me everybody his own mess. So I had prepared things, and I went to the remuneration committee, and I presented, all that had been prepared. The chair of the remuneration committee told me it's fine. I had looked what had been done the years before and tried to get some room of maneuver in case the chairman, the CEO wanted something a bit different. And then, I met the now CEO, but at the time who was the CFO, Frédéric Oudéa, who told me, Daniel Bouton was a bit surprised you didn't speak to him before. And I was called to see Daniel Bouton, the CEO, at the end of the day. And he told me what happened. And I told him, you didn't want me to start before. And the guy who was the head of HR told me, you'll come later. So, and there was this committee, so I had to do something. So then he was very fair. He told me, how did you think? So I explained him. So he said, I agree. It was all the plans for shares and stock options. So he said, I'm fine, but I could have decided not to do any plan. But he said, okay, remember it. And it was totally fair. But so I have plenty of stories like that. So
that kind of overlaps with the next question.
Interesting time.
Yeah. Any other, because my next question was, what was one of the most difficult conversations you've had or a decision you've had to make? Besides this one, perhaps.
As a woman in financial services, I don't think I had more difficult conversation than men have. Maybe sometimes, and I will say it happens all the time, that when I was global head of HR, I was faced with people which were not performing, and nobody had ever told them anything. And so, and there are 50 or 55, and it becomes complicated. And I took the people, and I told them the truth. And I thought they were deserving it. It's something you have to tell people to give them a chance to rebound. Otherwise, at some point they get fired and they have no chance to do anything. But it's not easy.
Any answer? We've got just 1 minute left, so just to finish off with, what is your piece of advice for women aiming for the top?
Oh, there are plenty of advice. I think women should dare, I think, but maybe one topic, I'm very much for quotas, because I think it's easier once you have enough women in the room. I started as the only woman at the executive committee, and I must say it was quite tough. I had the guys who were there, very much older than me. I was 46, so who were shouting at me each time I was speaking. And it became easier when there were more women recruited, because then the diversity is such that you start to, accept it in a different way. And I think I really, and what is interesting, if you look at statistics on board, in France, at board level, there is a mandatory, there is a target of 40% of women. If you look at the result, you have more or less 38% of women on the board. If you look at other countries where the target is 30%, then you have around 28, 27% of women. It's never above. And I think it's why, with quota, it forces the diversity. And the other thing I think is that when you start to have enough women somewhere, it opens to the rest of the diversity, foreigners, whatever. Because, women are very different from men in the way they look at topics, the way they think. and it's already a big discrepancy. So then you are open to more differences. And I think that's something, yeah. So me, I would tell women also lobby a lot to push for quotas and to push for having your seat, you know, around the table.
Thank you very much for giving us that very brief snapshot, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So thank you very much. And before, with that whirlwind tour and those insights, before I hand over for the closing to Tim, on behalf of Sustainable Finance Geneva, I really wanted to thank you for being here. I think there's no excuse not to act. The data is there. The trends are very clear. This is a huge business opportunity for investors as well. What seems to be lacking is the framework conditions in many cases and the political will, if I may, within and beyond organizations. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to Tim, for whom this has all become very personal, as he recently had a little girl, I understand. And so he was already involved before, but I think now even more involved, and we're really lucky to have you in the community driving this, Tim. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have heard so many rich insights over the course of the afternoon, and I want to thank the institutions and the experts who've contributed to GLISS activities over the course of the year, and to, of course, this wonderful event. I thought I would present you with some glimpse of the future for 2023, what we plan at GLISS. We want to raise the level of ambition. I think we've achieved already a lot with the support of Sustainable Finance Geneva and all of our industry partners. For next year, we look forward to the collaboration with 2X in establishing industry standards for investment products that claim to have a gender impact. We look forward to launching an ambassadors program among Swiss financial institutions so that we can increase and accelerate awareness about the relevance of investing in women that is good for business and good for the world. We also aim to continue our work on surveys. We are in discussions with 2 institutions that will help us generate more systematic data on the Swiss market from a gender lens perspective. And finally, we will do a partnership with Giving Women, which is an association of donors based in Geneva, to celebrate Women's International Day and the second anniversary of GLISS in March of next year. So on that note, I'm happy to conclude this GLISS session, this marathon session. Thank you to all of those who participated, and please join us for the cocktail outside. Thank you.